Well, hello. Grandma always made the best apple dumplings, so now you're gonna make them with me because they really are so special. They're different than a normal apple dumpling. So traditionally you're gonna think of an apple, maybe it has some type of pastry around the whole apple, baked all whole. Not grandma's. Grandma's are like a cinnamon roll where you make kind of a short pastry, roll it out, put apples in it with sugar and cinnamon, roll it up, cut it, put it in a baking dish, pour a syrup over it. Guys, these apple dumplings are totally worth it and they're delicious. So I have most of my apples done, and you're gonna know, if you follow my recipes, what you know about me is I hate wasting that peel. So I leave the peel on. Now, if you are anti-peel, I get it. There are people like that. My mom sometimes is one of them, but I'm working on her. You can take the peel off if you want to. One, I like the ease of leaving the peel, less work. Two, you're getting all that fiber and all that goodness and flavor from the peel. I'm not getting rid of that. So I'm just slice them into quarters, and then I kind of just slice them in 1/4 inch, maybe thickness, into small pieces. So just enough so you can kind of think, not huge pieces of apple, but just nice small pieces. Because like I said, we're rolling these up almost like a cinnamon roll. So it's pretty simple. Now, if I usually do these right before, so I don't worry about them browning. If you do it a long time before, you may want to dip them or put them in a little bit of acidulated water. So like some lemon juice with some water, something like that. I think growing up, Mom would sometimes even do 7-Up because that keeps them too. When I used to work in a kitchen in high school, we would do that. If we would prepare fruit for like a fruit platter a long time before, we'd dip it in 7-Up. It kind of just depended what was on hand, but it does work. So once you have all your apples sliced like this, that's all there is for the apple part. And this is what I love about this time of year. You can go out, if you can find a farmer's market, if you have trees, this is a great way to use those apples. So I'm gonna have my apples, I'm gonna set them aside. If they brown slightly, it's fine because they still taste good. We're gonna talk about the pastry. So like I said, this is a short pastry, so it's not a yeasted dough. It really just has butter worked into it, the short part, shortening. So I'm gonna start with some flour, and that's really, it's gonna be the base of it. It's a really simple dough, and that's what I love. It's not like one that takes a lot of work. It's very forgiving in the sense that even if it doesn't look perfectly as you're rolling it up, you're gonna then put it into a baking dish, cut it, so you don't really even notice any of that. So we have our flour in there. I always scoop my flour with a scoop so I don't do too much flour because it's easy to do too much flour. I'm gonna add some baking powder. So the baking powder, the flour, it's almost like kind of a modified biscuit, think of it as. And that's kind of what's great about this is it's a very simple pastry. You don't have to put too much work into it, and that's what I love. So after the baking powder, a little bit of salt. Again, when you're baking something, you want the salt. I'm just gonna stir that together. We're not adding sugar to the dough because we're adding sugar just like we would for cinnamon rolls, kind of. We're gonna add it with the apples. So we don't want a heavily sweet dough. Once the flour's there, we're gonna cut in butter. So it really is just like, you know, if you were doing some type of short pastry, kind of like a biscuit. That's what I love about it. So we're gonna open the butter, and I'm just gonna cut it in kind of smaller pieces. Now, one thing I will always get asked, do I use salted or unsalted butter? Generally speaking, I use unsalted because I add salt to my recipes, and then you can control the amount of salt. If I have salted butter, it's fine. That amount of little bit of salt, maybe just leave the salt out of the recipe, but that will be good too. There is always arguments. Some people think salted butter actually tastes better because it lasts longer. So always remember, you don't have to guess about this recipe. I don't expect you to watch this and just know. They're always on my website, wiseguide.com, and always in the description of the video, always. So what I'm doing right now, you could use a pastry cutter, but I have 2 pastry cutters right here. So I am picking up my pieces of butter, and I'm pushing between my thumb and forefinger, and you can see it kind of flattens them, kind of breaks them apart. So I'm gonna keep doing that until I get this coarse meal-like look, almost like a cornmeal, but a little bit more coarse. So I'm gonna keep doing this, and then I'll show you what it looks like. You can see here that this is a lot more, kind of looks like this crumbly, coarse mixture. And kind of I like to think when I can, kind of like a pie crust, when you can make a fist and it holds together, but it crumbles apart. That's perfect. So now we're gonna add in some milk. So this is a milk pastry, which means it's a very tender pastry. It's not very strong, but that's why with what we're making, it's perfect. So I'm gonna start stirring that milk in. And it's gonna slowly come together. It's gonna be kind of wet. You're gonna think, uh-oh, this looks like an interesting dough. It really is, but what I love is the tenderness kind of just works perfectly with apples, with, you know, you can mix this up in a food processor too. But why? I like to do things with my hands sometimes. It just makes us feel like we're doing good. Grandma made these all the time when like my mom was growing up and her brothers. She would make them just especially during the season when they would have apple trees. And I just think it's fun to still make them because they're just really honestly kind of a simple, beautiful thing to make. So as you can see, it's still somewhat crumbly. So what I'm gonna do is kind of start kneading it slightly until it comes together to kind of just form a dough, which the butter's gonna work in with that milk. And you're gonna see as you're kind of sitting there pushing on it, that becomes a dough. And I like to do this, finish it just outside here on my counter. Take out all the pieces and don't be scared. If you think it doesn't look right, just keep working with it. And eventually you're gonna get this kind of shaggy dough, just like if you were gonna do biscuits. And that's what I love. So as we sit here and kind of push it together, you can take a bench scraper if you need to make sure. But look what we're getting. We're getting this beautiful dough. And what I love is you can tell it's tender because you see how flaky it is, and that's what you want. So when you get it to a stage where it's kind of pressed out like a dough, if you've made biscuits, you're gonna be a pro at this and know exactly what I mean. But you can see now, I'm kind of just roughly putting it into maybe a rectangle, and now we're gonna roll it out. So this is the interesting part, but kind of where it becomes kind of like a cinnamon roll. I mean, it really is. That's to me the best example. I'm putting some flour down just to make sure it doesn't stick. Gonna take a rolling pin and start rolling. That's all it really is. And at first, if you want to, you can kind of move it, but you want to think more of a rectangle, obviously, than a square, because that's just kind of gonna help you roll it up easier. And if it gets a little sticky like that, some of the butter pieces, don't feel bad. Just butter both your rolling pin, which I don't use I love a roller like this, where it can be even all through. You can get even pressure on both sides. So I'm gonna keep rolling this out into a rectangle, then we're gonna top it, roll it, and bake it. I had this rolled out, and guys, I did not make it like you would a perfect see on TV here. I want you to see that, look, my edges are not perfectly straight. Look at them. No, they're not, but that's how it works out sometimes, and that's completely okay. Don't feel like they need to be. So now what we're gonna do is make a mess, and we're gonna put apples on it. It really is, it's a mess. But that to me is the best part. So you put the apples on, and the little like reserved amount you put in the bottom because you want them underneath everything. So you just want a thin layer of the bottom of your, greased, sprayed baking dish. This is such a, I don't know, it's just such a simple but kind of just perfect recipe, and you're gonna see why. So we have all those apples in here, kind of just spread them out. I am going to roll it, so obviously I'm gonna leave probably one side a little bit less apple. I'm gonna try to roll it towards me. So I'm gonna kind of spread them out where I don't mind if they go to this side, but then this edge I'm gonna leave an inch or two just to make sure I can roll it up. And we're gonna spread them out. There's like no science here. It's just, look at that, simple. So we're gonna add some sugar. This is the sugar we're adding really to the inside here. We do have a little bit more we're gonna add too. But we're gonna just coax it on top. Look at that. Kind of just like you would a cinnamon roll. And we're using just white sugar for this part, and you're gonna see why. And you kind of just spread that out, and that's what's gonna give it that sweetness. And then we're gonna take cinnamon, and we're just going to make sure we dust them all with cinnamon. That's kind of, to me, exactly like a cinnamon roll, but with apples, you know how delicious it's gonna be. So once you have that kind of all on there, and you want a good amount of cinnamon, because cinnamon actually helps thicken things too. So it's gonna actually, I'm gonna put a little bit on the bottom here too, just to make sure those apples have that same flavor. And then we're gonna slowly roll them up. Now, this is where it can get messy. It can be not perfect. Guess what? That's the best part. Grandma would always say, once they're all rolled up, once they're together, you don't know. And it's totally worth making, even if you think it's not gonna be perfect. Because see, those little pieces sometimes will poke through, but look, oh yeah. Then you roll it up onto that edge that you had exposed. If some apple falls out, don't feel bad. So on the edges where you probably don't have apple all the way to, I kind of close them in just because I don't want to count them kind of as a whole whole piece when I'm going to actually be rolling this and cutting it. So I kind of just push those edges in, and I'll put that downside in the pan. So now we have our pan, and we want to make sure we cut these, which at first is going to be, you're going to think a little hard because there's that apple in there. So once I have together, what I like to do is turn it over and kind of see my seam. And then if I can, like I said, it's a biscuit type dough, so it's not perfect, but just kind of try to adhere it. Now we're gonna set them up so you don't have to be perfect. I am gonna get a cutting board. I don't know. I know counters are supposed to be durable, blah, blah, blah. I don't trust anything. So I'm gonna bring this up here, get my cutting board up here, make a mess. And then I like to mark what I'm doing. So I want 9 cinnamon rolls, and I know that. So I'm gonna know I need 1 in the middle, because it's an odd amount. And then I just need to go, okay, I can do bigger than that. I want big, nice dumplings, kind of. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's what you want. If you mess up, you can do it again. I won't tell. So I have a sharp knife. And if you feel like, your edges, you can always roll it on the bottom to cut it. I just like to be able to see where that seam is and kind of know if I need to hold it. And so we're gonna cut them. And as we cut them now, I have one side done. This is gonna seem kind of messy, but look how fun that is. We're gonna put them in here on top of those apples. Nothing perfect, and that's the best part. When Grandma, I still have such memories of Grandma when she was actually older, like my memories of her, she didn't bake as much, but she loved to talk about it. And she would love when you wanted to make what she was talking about. So I would always be super interested. And I would always go and just ask her about everything she made, because some of it was so interesting. Because she would, to me, was so versatile with knowing how to use what was in season, what was on hand, and just make something out of it. And half the time she would tell me kind of what she did, but then be like, well, I never had a recipe, so I don't know. I don't know, I think that's amazing. So once we get all the rolls in there, which rolls, dumplings, whatever, you can kind of see they don't quite touch, but I like to make sure that they're all just kind of pressed in there, not gonna go anywhere. Now, what I did was, on the stove, I took some brown sugar and some water, and I put it into a kettle, and I let it come to a boil. It's pretty much just a heavy syrup, equal parts brown sugar, equal parts water. And this is what's gonna kind of make this soupy, delicious bottom to these dumplings. It's gonna be with those apples on the bottom that we put in there, the chopped ones, as this bakes. It sounds weird, and do you know why it sounds weird? It is weird, but you know what? It works. And that to me is the best part. So you pour it in there, and you're gonna think, wait, what about that dough? What about, don't worry about it. It's gonna be great. We're gonna put this into the oven. We're gonna let it bake. Then you have to let it cool, but then we're gonna enjoy it. Maybe some ice cream. Everything needs ice cream. Once it's cooled, you can kind of tell it just kind of settles down. It's still slightly warm, which is how I like it. Then you can just go in and start eating. So what I love is, you go in, they're already delineated into, I know it kind of seems odd to call them dumplings, but that's what Grandma called them, and you don't mess with Grandma. That's what you do. But look, you get it out, and if you kind of look in the bottom even of the pan, you're gonna see, look at this kind of sauce that comes and just kind of slightly collects. It's thickened, it's beautiful. That's what you love. So if you were on me, I would choose to do ice cream with it. If you were on the other side, my dad's side of the family, Grandpa always would douse this in milk. He would eat this with milk, because that Grandma makes apple dumplings kind of like this too. So I am going to just eat it like it is, because that's the point here. Look at that, you get those tender apples. It's so nostalgic. Instantly, I'm transported like back to when Grandma made them or Mom made them. And they're just delicious. Sorry, I was gonna keep eating because they're so good. What I love is, you get this flaky, almost biscuit-like dough that soaks up some of that wonderful sauce. And then you get the apples that are like crisp, tender, wonderful cinnamon flavor. It's not cloyingly sweet, which you would almost think with that syrup we put on them. It's just really well balanced. Put a big scoop of ice cream with it, or milk if you prefer. There's still some of you out there, I know it. Then you could do that. So whatever you prefer, it's just a delicious fall treat and a great way to enjoy apples. I mean, look how beautiful it is. It's a good presentation. So what do I hope you do? I hope you share it around, because when you share it around, of course that helps me so much, but it helps everyone see that, hey, this looks fun, you can do it. And that's the point, to enjoy good food and share it around. Check my website, wiseguy.com, for this recipe and every other recipe I do. Until next time, I don't know, enjoy something of the season. That's what makes us feel excited for what's coming up.